Well, it's just gone midday, so welcome everybody to this FIT webinar. My name's John Stewart, and I'm a trustee of the Foundation for Integrated Transport. And I'll be chairing today's session, and although I'm the public face today, I want to thank three people who did the hard work to make this possible: Brogan McPherson, Madeline Roberts, and Lisa Hopkinson. So thank you very much for doing all the preparation for this webinar. Just before I start, I want to say something about the title of the webinar. As you'll see, it's called Road Safety and Traffic Reduction. I think on reflection, we probably should have called it Road Danger, because we're really talking about the danger posed to people on the roads. But I'm afraid that's hindsight for you. You know, we've got the title that we've got. What I'm going to do before I introduce the speakers is just say a little bit about the format of the day. The webinar will go on till 1:30, and it's been streamed on YouTube live and also recorded. So it does mean you won't be able to see each other or know who's on the call apart from the speakers. I know that's a little bit frustrating, but I think it's the only way we can do it. But you can speak to us and you can speak to each other on the chat, and Brogan and myself will be monitoring the chat. So when it comes to the question and answer session, we can pick out the key points for a discussion. We've set aside about 40 minutes, maybe a little bit more, for questions and discussion, because we think that's a really important element of today. What I will do is introduce the speakers very briefly, and then in a little bit more detail when they're about to speak. We've got 4 speakers today. We've got Margaret Wincham, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the Parliamentary Advisory Council on Road Safety, better known to most of us as PACS. We've got Rod King, who is the founder and campaign director of 20's Plenty for Life. They will be the main speakers, and then there'll be responses, shorter responses from Amy Aaron Thomas. Amy is the Roads Policing Campaign Coordinator for Action Vision Zero. And then from Chris Douglas, who is the co-founder of and a volunteer at Unique Talent CIC and Roll Safe. But just before we kick off, I'm going to say a word or two about the Foundation for Integrated Transport. And Brogan, I think we've got some slides which we can put on the screen. Brilliant. You'll be all mightily relieved to hear I'm not going to read every single word on every single slide. But just to give you an idea of who we are and what we're about. We were established in 2014 by the late Dr. Simon Norton, who was a first-class mathematician and renowned transport campaigner. Let's go to the next slide, if we can, Brogan, please. What we do is promote radical change for sustainable transport. And we're one of the very few grant-making trusts devoted entirely to promoting change on transport and to giving grants just for transport projects and issues. And each of the speakers today represents an organization that has received a grant from ourselves. And we can go to the next one, please, Brogan. We offer 4 types of funding. You can see them outlined there. There's the traditional grants. There's small grants. There's also fellowships, which is largely goes to individuals. And we have a slightly different social investment fund, which is more business orientated. And as you can see there, makes loans and repayable grants to very often start-up businesses. And we can go on to the next one, please, Brogan. That's just a few of the people we are funding or have funded. These slides are so easy when people have such wonderful logos and such colorful logos. So just take a minute to admire them all. And finally, these are our fellows, and we'll be here too long if I ask you to try and put names to each fellow, but those are the people who are the fellows of the organization. So thanks for those, thanks for the slides, Brogan. We will now go on to our first speaker. It's Margaret Wincham, and as I said, Margaret is the Deputy Executive Director of PACS. She is a chartered civil engineer with a passion for transport, focused on people. And since joining PACS in 2021, Margaret has led their work on research and policy. So Margaret, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, John. Everyone can see those slides now. Super. Yes, thank you for introducing PACS. The Parliamentary Advisory Council for Transport Safety celebrated its 40th anniversary last year, and we're an NGO with unique selling points of being independent. Although we have parliamentary in our name, we hope that they listen to us, but they don't have to. We cover multi-mode, so today I'll be talking about road safety, but rail safety and air safety fall in our remit as well. And we have a broad spectrum of different members covering road safety organisations, local authorities, academics, police forces, and more. And our involvement with Parliament includes providing the Secretariat for the all-party parliamentary group for transport safety. So that's where we closely engage with members of the House of Commons and the House of Lords across the different political parties. I want to say thank you again for the Foundation for funding this report. It's something which we published at the end of 2020, but I think it's still very relevant, and I hope this will incite a useful conversation and awareness through this meeting today. So we well know that safety is crucial for encouraging people out of their private cars and onto public transport or pedal cycles or on foot. But what does safety actually mean? Well, PACS has a vision statement, which is for a vision for a transport system which is free from death and life-changing injury, where everyone feels safe. So we're acknowledging the importance of personal safety, but our primary focus is on the safety from physical harm through a collision. The first collision in the UK, which resulted in a fatality, was back in 1896. Since then, we now have a global pandemic. So this is the 7th UN Global Week of Road Safety. We're in the second decade, because they're acknowledging that 1.3 million people die on the roads in the world each year. And it's the leading cause of death for 5 to 29-year-olds, let alone thinking about the number of them who are suffer with life-changing injuries after the collision. And arguably, these collisions are largely preventable. There are systems which are, I'll speak about in a moment, where different elements of a collision can be broken down and prevented. However, the traditional emphasis on understanding safety has been looking at the victims, looking at their vulnerability, those being the focus, and not thinking about those travelling in a vehicle, protecting means of protecting the vulnerable. The focus on safety has been on the symptom and not on the cause, but things are starting to change, and Safe System is currently the best practice approach for preventing deaths and life-changing injuries. It recognises that even responsible people sometimes make mistakes, and that all elements of the road system contribute to safety outcomes. So it aims to manage the magnitude of the crash forces on the human body to remove the potential of death and serious injury. And it considers the needs of all road users, regardless of how they're travelling. So As John has mentioned already, road danger reduction could have been the title of this webinar, and I'll be mentioning that through this presentation. It involves addressing the sources of harm. How are we to tell what the sources of harm are? Well, it's not always clear from traditional statistics. Mayor Hillman in early 1990s investigated a contradiction between road safety policy, which was trying to simultaneously assure people while also depicting roads as being terrifyingly dangerous. So he argued that road accident statistics, for example, ones which I've shown here, could be a bad measure of danger because when danger is perceived, then the perception is acted on. Here, from this graph published in the Road Casualties Great Britain for 2019, presents, to a layperson at least, walking and cycling as being much more dangerous than travelling in cars. You can see a graph showing the number of people who are killed while travelling by those modes are higher than the others. Perception that HGVs and car travel would be safer and not relevant to the safety problem. But that is problematic because for both road safety and for transport planning, it's so easy to draw the conclusion that if we were to increase the number of people who are walking or cycling, then we would have a disproportionate increase in the number of casualties, and therefore walking and cycling shouldn't be encouraged. Well, PACS have taken the opportunity in this report to look at things the other way around, looking at the cause and not the outcome, looking at the total number of fatalities associated with each mode. It gives a completely different message and a different understanding of the level of danger imposed on other road users. So what we're looking at is what kills on the road. We're not looking at who was in the vehicles, and we're not trying to understand the cause or the fault or the liability, just what are the vehicles that are involved in a collision where someone else dies. So let's have a look at these stats in a different way. I just want to clarify that we're using the data from 2019, and this is the last genuinely pre-pandemic year. Data for 2022 will come out in provisional form at the end of May and then complete form in September. And through this presentation, I'll be using this form of graphs where the blue part of the bar is the total number of people killed while travelling in that mode, and the red is the total number of other road users killed in the collision involving that mode of transport. So maybe if we start off with cars, that middle bar in the middle, we can see that it's pretty much equal. The number of people, it's just over 700 people who were car passengers when they were killed, and just over 700 where the car was the other vehicle involved in the fatal collision. Now, it's not surprising that that bar is highest because most miles are travelled by private car. So maybe if we consider this a new way and look at it by the rates, the deaths by distance travelled. It's well known that by distance travelled, motorcyclists have the highest rate of death, and predominantly it's the motorcyclist who dies. 21% of motorcycle collisions, in fact, involve no other vehicle. From this, sometimes pedestrians and cyclists would be viewed as unsafe because of the blue part of the bars that we're looking at here. In fact, the red part is very small. There are very few collisions where a pedestrian or a cyclist has caused the death of someone else. They cause very little risk to other road users. There are only 3 people in motorised vehicles in 2019 who were killed in collisions involving pedestrians and cyclists. Conversely, nearly 600 pedestrians and cyclists, people walking and cycling, were killed by motorised vehicles. So some modes are seen as comparatively safe to travel by, but are disproportionately dangerous to other road users looking at the passenger miles travelled. This is best demonstrated by focusing from that last graph just on the red parts of it. So here we're sort of doing a zoomed in look from that previous graph, and we can see straight away that the tallest red bar is vans and light goods vehicles. They're 10 times more likely to be involved in a collision where someone else is killed than cars. Interestingly, motorcycles come in a close third most dangerous vehicle type where third most likely to involve vulnerable road users being killed or being killed in this case. serious injury statistics are not included in this presentation. So as we're considering moving away from private car use, it's worth having a look on this graph at buses and coaches as well, where we can see that they are the safest mode for users and the in a vehicle, and the second least dangerous mode of motor vehicle for other road users per passenger mile travelled. Looking at people walking and cycling, we want people to move out of private motor vehicles. We can, as saw from the other graph, they cause very little danger to other road users. Only 3 other road users were killed. But conversely, dangerous motorised vehicles are involved in a very large number of collisions in which active travel mode users who cause very little danger to others are killed. Now, we have to remember that there is actually an inherent level of hazard involved in travelling by transport as well. So we do have on this graph here some pedal cyclists, in fact, 14% of pedal cycle fatalities where no other road users were involved. It was a single vehicle collision. 14% might seem high. In fact, for 21% of motorcyclists I mentioned, there's no other vehicle involved. 32% of car fatalities. E-scooters are a new mode of transport on our roads. It's not included in this graph, but we have carried out research looking at the 32 people who have died in e-scooter collisions from 2019 to this year. There were 32 of them, and just under 50% of them were single vehicle collisions. Sort of side bit of statistics, the DFT's evaluation report from the rental trials for the first 18 months of the trial found that e-scooter casualty rate was 3 times that of pedal cycles. That's casualty rate across the types of collision, not just fatal. So as these new forms of micromobility come onto the scene, we really need to consider carefully how hazardous they are for the riders and how dangerous they are for other road users, and consider them in the context of, would a rider have been safer or at less risk of harm if they'd been travelling by another form of transport. But in actual fact, many of them would have walked. So let's have a look at the what kills pedestrians. HGVs and cyclist collisions gain a significant amount of media attention, but it's actual fact HGVs were involved in 5 times the number of pedestrian cyclists than pedestrian deaths and cycle deaths in 2019. 51 pedestrians were killed in HGV collisions versus 12 pedal cyclists. And it's really important to focus on HGVs. Across Europe wide, they provide only 1.5% of the number of vehicles on the road, but involved in almost 15% of all fatalities across Europe. You might be aware that Euro NCAP safety ratings are changing, and they're starting to look at safety for HGVs, considering safety of other road users. We also know that longer semi-trailer study has concluded, and they'll now be used on our roads. Be interesting to understand more about the risks that they pose. Anyway, let's go back to where we were, just as a quick summary of what we've seen so far. So traditionally, statistics and many records record the number of people killed by the mode of travel that they were using. And it would suggest that walking and cycling are more hazardous than other modes. But thanks to the foundation, we've produced this report, which shows, demonstrating the information the opposite way round. We understand the relative danger of other forms of transport. And we're really pleased that the DFT have adopted this. So you'll see when the data is published in May, they will include a graph demonstrating this relative danger, showing that pedal cycling and walking is less dangerous, and that coach passengers and bus passengers are least likely to be harmed when travelling by these means. So what does this mean? Might this insight into road safety be important for others? Well, I hazard a guess that many of you are here because of your passion for other policy agendas, and that there's definitely a momentum for change away from private car use. There's policies encouraging us to be more active, to use more sustainable means of transport, therefore tackling obesity, mental health issues, air quality, climate change, and much more. And I hope that you can see how safety is integral to all those different policy changes that we're encouraging too. So what if people were to cycle more and use their private car less? Would roads then be safer? Well, numerous studies have shown that the exposure, that's the amount that people travel, is really crucial, a crucial risk factor. So all else being equal, if you were to increase travel, then it would increase crashes. But if people were walking and cycling, would that significantly impact overall fatality numbers? I guess we have to think first about the sort of the scale of the mode shift. If someone's been driving 5,000 miles a year, it's unlikely that they would then cycle 5,000 miles a year or walk 5,000 miles a year. They're likely to swap that longer trip for a shorter trip. Another measure could be that the National Travel Survey has shown that in the last 15 years, the average distance travelled has been about the same, about 200 miles per person per year. And despite the increase in the UK population over the last 15 years, the number of pedestrian fatalities has actually fallen almost up to around a third in that period of time. Cycling, similarly, there have been lots of campaigns and various degrees of encouragement from central government and local authorities to promote cycling, and that has increased. More people are now cycling, yet the number of people killed when cycling has gone down. And we could probably spend some time focusing on London, but just quickly touching on it now. There have been a real investment by Transport for London to increase their policies and infrastructure to improve cycle safety, and there the figures have reduced most significantly. Only 5 people were killed in London when cycling in 2019. So we'd argue that no, if more people were to cycle or walk, then it wouldn't necessarily increase the number of people who are killed on our roads. As I mentioned earlier, PAC's focus is on transport safety. We want to see 0 deaths and life-changing injuries. We want to encourage transport modes that offer the safest means of transport for their users and the least harm to others. So I've tried to explain here how by changing the presentation of the national statistics, policymakers and others can better understand what the relative levels of danger are that are posed by different modes of transport. We need that to be filtered through to new safety strategies, making them more effective. So we'd like to then to include more use of targets, and we also want them to be more equitable, to be based on a safe system principle where people who are travelling by all means of transport are recognised. And we hope that with these introductions in road safety, that can also support the initiatives for road safety reduction as well. Thank you.
Margaret, thank you so much for that. That was a really fascinating perspective, which I think we can probably talk about in more detail a little bit later on, but thank you for that. Our next speaker is probably a familiar face to many of you. It's Rod King, who, as I said earlier, but I'll repeat for those who've joined us just recently, is the founder and campaign director of 20's Plenty for Us. Rod set up the organization in 2007 in order to assist communities wanting to lower speed limits, and has had what can only be described as phenomenal success. So Rod, it's over to you.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, John, and very much I'd like to say thank you for the Foundation for Integrated Transport for all the support which is given to us over the years. We've been campaigning for 20-mile streets as the urban village norm, and what that very much is about is transforming those public spaces between buildings that we call streets. And really that transformation, we think, is key to making those streets much more livable and safer for all. So areas which I'm going to cover, well, who are we? What we want? What do we campaign for? The support we've had from the foundation, and I think it's important to show how that support from the foundation has really made a difference in changing the streets in the UK and beyond, and look at some of the results which we've had, and also how our campaigners can achieve results in the future. So who are we? Well, we assist communities, and I guess we help them to help their politicians do the right thing. And I know sometimes that's a pretty hard job, but it can be done. We have 600 local campaigns around the country, and a few more in other countries as well. We're very much about empowering local campaigns with information and advice. It's not so much about our campaigning, but how we help our thousands of supporters to go out there and make change in their communities. And that is to better balance the movement, the safety, and the economy, and create better streets for people. It also aligns with global best practice from the WHO and the UN. And it's great to be here in UN Global Road Safety Week this year. And in the last UN Global Road Safety Week in 2021, I was pleased that 20-mile-an-hour limits and 30-kilometer limits as a norm were, if you like, the main subject of that Global Road Safety Week. And that is really setting 20 mile an hour as a norm where people are, with exceptions only where it's evidentially safe to have a higher speed limit. We're only a small team. There's myself, who's a volunteer, but we have a fantastic team of part-time professionals who assist. And what they do is assist those thousands of local volunteers around the country. And that is the real strength of 20's Plenty and the real, I think, driver for the success which we've achieved. What do we want? Well, if we look at some of what we've achieved, this shows all the local authorities where 20 mile an hour has been set as a norm. It's the majority of the 40 largest urban authorities in the UK. It's all the inner London boroughs and more outer London boroughs. It's Cardiff and Edinburgh. Many shire counties, including Cornwall, Oxfordshire, Cambridgeshire, are rolling out that 20 mile an hour as a norm. Wales has already legislated for a national 20 mile an hour default speed limit for restricted lit roads from September 2023. And Scotland is doing so to set 20 mile an hour as a norm by 2025. In fact, it's already nearly 30 million people who are living in 20 mile an hour places. So what are the FIT projects which we've done where we've had support? Well, our first one was in 2019 to 2020, and that was very much around really catalyzing change in London. And now there are 22 20 mile an hour boroughs in London, and I'm pleased that we've just added Newham, which is announced that it will be moving to 20 mile an hour as a default progressively. And the green areas show the 20 mile an hour roads in London as of May last year. TfL are to introduce another 140 kilometers of 20 mile an hour limited roads on the strategic and arterial network which they manage. And they've been getting fantastic reductions in casualties. This is analysis of those arterial roads. And here we can see really positive, or rather, I should say, negative reductions of minus 25% for collisions involving death or injury, 36% reduction in vulnerable road users, and a 63% reduction in collisions involving people walking. Our next product was 20's Plenty for Wales. It was in 2018 that the Welsh government gained the devolved power to set national speed limits. This was picked up by our campaigners, and they said, well, why can't we do that? Why can't we address that? And so we started that campaign of working with our campaigners in Wales. We did a lot of cross-party engagement and involvement with NGOs in Wales. I got very used to the train from Warrington down to Cardiff, which does go through some excellent scenery, I must admit. And one of the outcomes from that in 2019 was the setting up of a task force to just look how this could be done. And we were one of the many NGOs, but also institutions, road safety, traffic, police, emergency services, etc., who've all formed this multi-agency group to actually say, how could this be done? How can it be done cost effectively? How can it be done easily? And how can it cover all the possibilities? And that resulted in the publishing of a report, which was debated in Senate in 2020, got cross-party approval, and following that in 2022, last year, legislation was passed by the Senate to set the national speed limit for all urban village roads, which were restricted, to change it from 30 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour, with local authorities able to set exceptions. And that will be effective on the 17th of September 2023. And of course, now we're working with the Foundation for Integration Transport on really 20's Plenty for All. Because if we have the value that in just one street, people should be able to walk and cycle and choose their mode of transport safely and comfortably, then really we have that value for all our streets. And it's really looking at, I think, this statement. It is illogical for our governments to retain a national urban limit of 30 miles an hour and then urge local authorities and cities to change it to 20 miles an hour on most of their roads because the national limit is no longer considered appropriate. This is completely illogical. If there's a problem with the national limit for urban and village streets, then we should look at changing that national limit in the same way it's been done with Wales, and still having that flexibility at local authority level to set a higher limit where it's appropriate. And so we are working, supporting campaigns across the UK with social media, Zooms, resources, advocacy, and advice. We're supporting the Welsh Government and town and community councils in Wales with our Diolch Didag program, and that's Zoom meetings, it's stickers, it's advice. It's really engaging with communities and celebrating this change which is coming. But you know, it's never enough just to know that 20 miles an hour is the right thing to do. It's not good enough to get the change which we need. We have to change the context in which we look at the roads. It's really got to be through the lens of the citizen, the child who wants to walk to school, the elderly person who wants to keep walking to the shops. We've got to change the context away from what it feels like to be behind the steering wheel in the comfort in control of a car, in control of what's happening, being warm and being safe. We have to change that context so people can really understand the societal benefits which come from making such a societal change and just slowing down the vehicles in the presence of people. We have to change the way we look and feel. We have to enable drivers to feel that it's not about the width of the road, but it's about the presence of people. And that is changing the way we traditionally have looked at streets and roads, and making that change in terms of what our aspirations are, and in terms of how we can deliver those aspirations as well. We have to catalyze debate. It's not just a case of having one good idea and taking that to the authorities. It's a case of getting that debate, getting that wide debate, right, to really catalyze that change in the way we feel about our spaces. And also it's about helping our campaigners to be good activists. And you know, there's a lot involved there in terms of how do you influence the right people? How do you not bother about the wrong people? How do you actually get involved in the public? How do you do it effectively? So these are all the things which we help our campaigners do. I say change our perspective, change the context. And yes, if you want to look at a road, crouch down at the side of a street. Look at that road from the height of an 8-year-old. Or maybe try walking slowly across the road like an 80-year-old. Or someone who is disabled, someone who has imperfect hearing or sight. All of these people exist. Streets aren't just for car drivers. They're for everyone who has the right of access. And we do that with infographics such as this one, which actually shows how wide area 20-mile-an-hour limits with engagement is 7 times more cost effective than putting down speed bumps. And that's because for the cost of treating 250 people on a road with speed bumps, we can reach a whole community of 12,500 with a sign limit, with engagement and advertising. And here again, another infographic which we produce, which is really identifying all the people who are going to benefit in Wales from the 20-mile-an-hour limit. And we sometimes forget this. We focus the argument around the driver, but what about the 300,000 households who don't have a car? The 40% of lone parent households that don't have a car or van. There are 600,000 people in Wales which have concessionary travel passes. And also, of course, we can look at the estimates of the savings in death and injury and those 12,000 people who won't be hit by vehicles and injured or killed over the next 10 years because we have lower speed limits. Key strategy for our campaigns is really based on 3 factors. Build capacity in your local team of campaigners. You need a team of people ready to play the long game. It won't happen overnight. Choose your team carefully. Make it cross-party. Don't turn it into a polarized political debate. Multi-mode as well. Don't turn it into a cyclist versus motorist debate. Build tangible community support in your community. Involve schools, the associations, the elderly, public health. Change the context for thinking about speed and aspire to make your place a better place to be. And then make that change based on community support. Allow politicians to change policy. Identify what can enable them to do that. And recognize that change is possible. It's happening all over the world because we have 21st century demands which are changing what our aspirations are. 20 mile an hour is the foundation for active travel and modal shift. It's key to the first and last mile in public transport being safe and comfortable. And of course, expect opposition. 10% of people we know object to 20 mile an hour limits, 70% in our approval, but work with those 70%, find them, empower them, and enable them to get that change. There's one thing which I'll end on. I can't have Danny speaking because a technology glitch. But one thing which was said by Professor Danny Dorling was 2020 has been one of the most remarkably successful campaigns in the UK in the last decade. Thousands of streets have moved from 30 mile an hour to 20 mile an hour. Everywhere this is welcome. Almost nobody asks for them to be set back. And the spread and rate of success of this policy has been incredible. What makes it particularly incredible is that it's happened over the course of the most difficult decade. The first decade since the Napoleonic Wars, the average wages fell in the UK and people became poorer. A decade in which life expectancy between 2014 and 2018 has fallen. A decade in which our educational services fell apart and so much else went wrong. It is difficult to think of any other aspects of policy of public life that we have seen a slow, then rapid, and then faster rate of improvement in the increased safety and efficiency of our roads, because people in villages, in towns, and in the whole country, in the case of Wales, have decided that they are going to make their lives better, regardless of everything else which is going on. So thank you for listening. Please ask questions. See our website, follow us on Twitter, email us. And of course, if you haven't got a local campaign to join, then why not set one up? We'd be pleased to help you. Thank you very much.
Rod, thank you so much indeed for that. There were some stuff in the chat about the excellent slides that you put up and that Margaret put up, if they can be shared. And I think Brogan, who's organised this event, feels that they probably can with participants. Right, now, there's even more to come, and it's just as good. Let's go on to Amy. Again, I introduced Amy at the beginning, but we'll do so again because people are joining us throughout the hour and a half. Amy is Amy Aaron Thomas, and she is the Roads Policing Campaign Coordinator for Action Vision Zero. Amy has worked for Action Vision Zero since 2019, where she coordinates their roads policing and wider traffic-related work, which is focused on reducing road danger. So, nice to see you, Amy. Nice to see you again, and it's all yours.
Thank you, John. So I've got 5 minutes to respond to Margaret and Rod, but also with permission from FIT, I wanted to make sure that everyone understood the difference between road safety and road danger reduction. Now, road danger reduction has been around for 30 years, and it was from the beginning, it was concerned about not just the inappropriate use of motor vehicles, but also the excessive use. So by the end of the first year, they had developed a charter and it had guiding principles. And this was led by Dr. Bob Davis and the Road Danger Reduction Forum. And in those principles, one of the ones was discouraging the unnecessary use of motor vehicle transport, where there were benign modes of cycling and walking available or public transport. So traffic reduction was key from the start 30 years ago. Another principle was the need to consider or develop an environmentally sustainable transport strategy. Again, this is groundbreaking. Third principle was around promoting walking and cycling at a time government was discouraging cycling, at a time where road safety was still very much focused on victim blaming, as Margaret mentioned. So that was about tackling excessive use. They also looked at inappropriate use, and this is where it still differs from road safety. It's more nuanced. They wanted to seek a genuine reduction in danger, and they wanted danger to be tackled at source, which is what PACS did 27 years later, 26 years later. And it's great because as Margaret mentioned, road safety had traditionally only looked at who was being injured. So casualty groups, victim groups, and then all the improvements was put on them. Road danger reduction said, no, we had to look at who's posing harm to others. There are also another key principle was that you had to find new measures to define the level of danger. And this is still where we differ from road safety. because road safety is still pretty much focused almost exclusively on reducing killed and seriously injured, or killed and life-changing, or just killed. That's not enough for people in road danger reduction. We said that you need wider indicators. KSIs are not an accurate representation of risk. Margaret gave a few examples why not. They're also the reported statistics, which government has known for decades, or woeful underestimates of the true toll. Also, it's so important, the perception of safety. We're based in London, where our Vision Zero plan is based on road danger reduction. We're fortunate in that. That was launched in 2018. No other Vision Zero plans at that time were based on road danger reduction, but we're building on the healthy streets approach. Remember, London was the first city in the world to have a transport health action plan. One of their key indicators was people feeling safe. A key indicator was not reducing KSIs, it was people feeling safe, and that's a big difference. Other indicators road danger reduction has campaigners have called for include those adopted by the Healthy Street Scorecard in London, where they look at the percent of people walking and cycling, or percent of trips made by walking and cycling, or they look at the percent of roads that have become 20 miles per hour. So I just wanted to clarify and make sure that everyone understood the difference between road safety and road danger reduction. Because any plan that is only talking about KSI is not road danger reduction, or not completely road danger reduction. So I think it was fantastic, the research that PACS did looking at tackling danger at source. I think we can go farther. If you look at this, if you get the exact stats what DFT will provide, we know like in London in 2021, in collisions between cars and cyclists, there were 2 cyclists killed, but 640 cyclists seriously injured. There wasn't one car occupant seriously injured, let alone killed. So I think we need to have the more granular data just to remind people why we need to focus on those driving, posing harm. I also just want to say in terms of the 20 mile per hour and the progress in Wales, which is just fantastic. DFT adopted a safe systems approach in 2015. Every local authority has pretty much followed. Safe systems accepts that humans have a tolerance to speed. No surprise there, but one of their key principles is that any roads that where there's heavy flows of vulnerable road users, your speed limit should be 30 kilometers or under. So I would say anybody who's based on safer systems should have already adopted a 20 mile per hour limit. And I just want to say in London, where we're fortunate, in 2021, when TfL published their action plan progress report, they reached out to the boroughs and said, we need your help on lowering speeds, not just limits, but speeds, and also reducing traffic volumes on their residential streets. Action Vision Zero is trying to help with that. We, like 20's Plenty, do a monthly Zoom of local campaigners. We also collate the information and share so that everyone's kept up to date with progress. And I want to say one of the things we've published most recently is a resource where we're trying to collate examples of good practice in the new transport and sustainable transport strategies. So whether that's Lambeth's curbside strategy, which was just revolutionary. We also had Southwark's draft sustainable transport strategy. They're like acknowledging the problems around underreporting or that electric vehicles weren't the solution. We're trying to pull out good practice and share among other local campaigners. Now my time's up. Ask me more questions later.
Thanks very much. Your time was up a little. You caught me a little bit off guard there, but that's great. That was absolutely great. And I should say there'll be questions later. But first of all, Chris. Now, as again, I'll reintroduce Chris. Chris is the co-founder of and a volunteer for Unique Talent CIG. I think that's just a great name, Chris. Unique Talent. It beats anybody else's today, definitely. And also of Roll Safe. Chris has a career spanning 14 years across a range of sectors, but his passion has always been working with young people who have faced diversity. He is the director of a number of companies and has worked with a range of leading support charities across the UK. He has a degree in business management and is currently completing his master's in social work studies with the University of Leeds. Chris, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today and have you all in attendance. Really good hearing from some colleagues speaking about current and key issues around transport safety, advanced micromobility as well. A key point for me that I wanted to get across today, you know, I was one of the early adopters of micromobility, and I work with a number of young people that have adopted, you know, micromobility, e-scooters in particular. They've really taken off within our communities. I think a key point for me that I want to get across is, you know, how, and the question for everyone's thoughts is, you know, how do we include young people in the progress, you know, and the development of this transportation has taken off. In particular, young people. You know, we've seen the trials across various councils come along. And, you know, young people straight away have been excluded from that because there's a restriction on that method of transportation as well. And there's been a number of observations and complaints about the use of private e-scooters on our streets as well. So I suppose the key thing I'd like to get across is how do we strike that balance, you know, in terms of including young people and ensuring that we don't exclude them to the point where they take it into their own hands and use it unsafely. We've had the privilege of developing an e-scooter safety training program for young people, and we've delivered this to a number of youth clubs and schools just to educate young people on how to use micromobility safely and responsibly as well. I think a big thing for us in delivering that training is around the sort of attitude, sort of thinking and behavior and preparation for use of micromobility as well. And I suppose more than that is you know, challenging young people around the responsibilities of the use of this transportation as well. Key things that's come across is a lack of understanding of the danger and responsibility of what they're getting involved with, or what transportation they're taking out on the streets as well. And you know, just a major concern for us, you know, speaking with young people and engaging with them over the past couple of years is their understanding of the road networks, basic hazard perception and road safety. So in the training courses and engagement with them, just teaching them about basics, you know, and you know, stuff for many of us, which would be patronizing, is almost essential for some of these young people. And I think our biggest worry is, you know, young people being able to access micromobility without any training or experience whatsoever. You know, we've seen, I think statistics show that there's a massive danger in doing so. Myself, I've got a motorbike license and a car license, and I've been using the road system for a long time now. And you know, I wouldn't recommend young people just jumping on micromobility, specifically e-scooters, and even I'd even go as far as electric bikes as well. You know, I would one of the key things we would like to put forward is a basic training course at the very least for our young people accessing this network of transport as well. We've seen some fantastic results with our young people engaging in the training course, and just seeing a shift in attitude and an understanding of the true dangers of using micromobility, and also just understanding the responsibility that they hold with this method of transport as well. And just by delivering a basic training course and taking up, you know, young people do have short attention spans at times, but, you know, engaging in a practical training course where you can demonstrate and show examples of dangers and hazards, you're able to change negative perceptions and maybe ignorance towards basic safety approaches when young people are out on the streets and using these micromobility methods as well. So I think a key thing for us and our position on this is, you know, as it stands, you know, we wouldn't want to see the use of micromobility within young people without any guidance or training or just preparation for the use of such things as well. And also, if there is going to be a, you know, if it is as it stands, where you've got to be a certain age and use a license, I still think there needs to be some basic training and guidance in terms of how the best way to use these systems are, just so young people don't, you know, just to have that basic awareness, as you do if you're driving a motor vehicle on the streets as well. So yeah, that sums up in a short what I'd like to cover today.
Chris, I always love people who do it in a short way. That's absolutely perfect. You make a chair's life very, very nice and easy. This idea of involving young people is so critical. And I think we may come back to that in some of the discussion. I think it may be worth the speakers unmuting yourselves, because we're going to go into questions and discussion now. There's been a number of points come up in the chat. There's been one or two specific points, and I think one or two, particularly for yourself, Rod, though others may want to comment, is around the question of enforcement. 20 miles, what people are saying, 20 miles per hour is great, but can be enforced. And linked to that, there's a question about the attitude of the police to 20 miles per hour limits. I know from working in this area many years ago, the police were not very helpful, but I think things have moved forward. So do you want to comment a little bit on this whole question of enforcement?
Yeah, sure. I think the most important thing about setting a 20-mile-an-hour limit instead of 30 is it changes the reference point at which you're recognizing speed, because that is important, because that's in the mind of both those who are exceeding the speed limit and everybody else. So we've changed that reference point, and what it does show is that when you change that reference point, even without enforcement, you get good reductions in speed, particularly on the faster roads. Enforcement. One of the issues is that there are various degrees of commitment to enforcement around the country in police forces. For example, in Avon and Somerset in 2021, they issued 23,338 notices of intended prosecution just on 20-mile-an-hour limit streets. And so it's very clear that it is possible for police forces to enforce 20-mile-an-hour limits. And I know in London, they've increased the capacity for processing offences massively on speed limit enforcement. So that makes a big difference. We're changing the norm. ISA is coming in on more and more cars. That's
you just want to say what do you want to explain what ISA is, Rod?
Yeah, that's intelligent speed assistance, whereby the car will both tell you whether you're exceeding the speed limit, but also it will actually reduce the speed in order to keep within the speed limit on some vehicles. And again, that's making it much easier to conform with speed limits. The vast majority of people don't want to speed, right? They want to stay within the law. So the more people who are more able to keep within the speed limit, the better it will be. And ISA will change the relationship between the public and the police, because in future you will only be able to exceed the speed limit if you make a conscious decision to do so and override the intelligent speed assistance which you've got in your vehicle. So all of these are changing, but it is societal change. And as 20 mile an hour becomes more the norm, and people associate it not with particular sites, but with the presence of people, with communities. It's what you do where people are, where buildings are. And that will gradually, I think, get into the, if like public psyche about what we do in the presence of people and in the presence of buildings which house those people.
Thanks very much, Rod. Amy, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thanks. This is key to us with our roads policing campaigning, and it is a problem around the country. It's shocking how few forces actually enforce 20 mile per hour. And it's not so much even that intensive for police, because the vast majority of speed enforcement is done through safety cameras. So if you just convert your roads from 30 mile per hour to 20 mile per hour, those cameras should work. In London, all our 30 mile per hour cameras are capable of doing 20 mile per hour enforcement as well. I know that's not the case in all areas. I wanted to just flag up London as a success story. When Vision Zero Action Plan was published in 2018, we had so little speed enforcement overall and almost none in 20 mile per hour. They've now increased it sixfold. It dominates our speed enforcement now. And that's largely through campaigning or complaints from not just community residents, but also councillors. Community Speed Watch was quite popular in London, or the demands for it. The councillors were complaining. Transport for London and the Met Police launched a borough speed camera enforcement request system where they would go out and enforce speeds on roads where the councillors had requested. They just got so much demand, I'd say, from local authorities. Last point I just want to make, this is also another example why we can't focus on KSIs, because I do worry that police think that, or police or anybody thinks that if you can speed and as long as you didn't kill or seriously injure someone, it was a success. And it's not. We have to get it across to police that you're still intimidating and scaring people from walking and cycling.
Thanks, Amy. There's a related sort of point, Chris, that's come up about the police attitude to e-scooters, and would it be easier if is the law just a little bit of a mess right now? And when you're looking at that, also there's a very practical question about, is there a minimum age for e-scooters at the moment?
At the moment, the law is very unclear, and we're
Yes.
still all waiting for clarity on the law. It's left everyone in a difficult position. Young people have found freedom in the use of e-scooters and the ability to have independence in travel, which is a fantastic thing. On the other side, which I very rarely hear mentioned, the danger of e-scooters, for me, one of the biggest ones is young people's health, and having them out on hybrid bikes. That one's overlooked hugely. The minimum age at the moment on the e-scooter trials is 18, and you have to have a license with that as well. So that excludes young people. So what's happening at the moment is you're getting young people out on their own private use ones because of legislation. They're oblivious to the law because they don't do research like us. And what happens is if you've got a police officer who's bothered, they will end up getting stopped. The e-scooter will get confiscated and they'll get a fine. And in some cases, if the police officers want to come down heavy, they can end up with 6 points on their license. Many young people who we've consulted with are completely oblivious to all of this. So they're ending up in a very strict, sticky situation. And it also creates a little bit of tension between police and young people as well. Police are on a difficult strand as well because they have some discretion. They can either enforce everything mentioned or they can turn a blind eye. So we're in a bad place because police are not consistent in enforcement, and young people haven't got a clue what's going on.
No, and there's a related point come up in the chat that for a lot of people, particularly low-income youngsters, cycle storage is a real problem. For an ordinary bicycle, or far less an electric bicycle. Whereas e-scooters give, as you say, independence, but independence on a lower income because they're much easier to store.
Yeah, absolutely. One, you've got the benefit of storage. Two, you've got the benefit of cost in comparison to a bicycle that, the price is much lower. But, there are pros and cons on all angles. As I said, I would prefer to see a young person on a push bike because, they're going to be more fit. They're going to be pedaling. And there's much more benefits to that. And that's something that's really overlooked and is a key point for me personally. But, it does give them freedom, and it does allow, I know young people that travel to school and back on it, and some of the schools have accommodated it, but it's so inconsistent across the board. Schools, local authorities, it varies vastly in terms of enforcement, how it's used. But yeah, there are pros and cons across the board.
Thanks for that. Margaret, you wanted to come in.
Yes, so PACS has carried out research into the safety of private e-scooters because all e-scooters which are not part of the rental scheme are illegal to use. They shouldn't be used on public roads or in public places. there is the conundrum that they are legal to sell in the same way that you can buy a quad bike, but you should not be using it on public roads. E-scooters, like quad bikes, are not regulated for use on public roads. So that means that there aren't speed limits, there aren't protections for the riders when they're using them on roads. We're frustrated because the government has really dragged its heels on setting out some legislation. So we have examples in Europe where you can rent an e-scooter and you can use a private e-scooter, and they're limited for speed, and they have specific areas of the road that they can use or not use, and ways in which they're used. ACTS have made recommendations for private e-scooters. We're pleased to hear that the Transport Select Committee are going to be interviewing people tomorrow, a minister and a senior civil servant, because at last they're going to be reviewing their report from 2020, and as and when parliamentary time allows, we hope that a transport bill will be brought through with micromobility, low speed, zero emissions vehicles included in it, and then a secondary legislation would be then for e-scooters. So there's no doubt that micromobility is attractive to people to use, be that an e-scooter, be that a pedal cycle, which is adapted so that it is electrically controlled without needing to use the pedals. Both of those are limited in their use at the moment to private land, yet we see more and more people using them. We really need clear legislation put in place so that the police are enforcing where they need to be, rather than just sporadically as and when campaigns or incidents draw them to do so.
Thanks for that, Margaret. We're going to move on to another area in just a minute, but I think there's one last related question here, a very specific one. It's about delivery bikes and mopeds who travel around with L plates. Do we know how long? The question is, do we know how long you can have an L plate? You know, can you have an L? Can you be a learner forever, or is there a limit? Does anybody know the answer to that? If not, go on, Margaret.
Yes, I understand it's once a year they need to go for renewal. So in some ways, there is a degree of greater involvement with trainers by having a license, a provisional plate. Whereas if you were to, those of us who have gained a driving license to drive in a motor vehicle, the next time we have to be reviewed is as we get to reach old age, whereas learner plates would need to be reviewed more regularly. I think we do have this issue raises a larger problem, which is of the gig economy and the safety of people who are using powered two-wheelers, but that could be a whole nother session.
It could be a whole other session, but that was, I didn't know if anybody had an answer to that, and you had, so that's absolutely great. There's a wider theme coming through in one or two of the questions, and I think all of you kind of touched on this a little bit, but when we're talking about the road danger and deaths and the downsides really from motor vehicles, there's other downsides from motor vehicles as well. There's air pollution, I think was mentioned one of the questions. There's noise, and the question really, and I'm putting a number of questions here together, but the question really was, should we be looking at the whole question more holistically? I think we're beginning to do that, but road danger and before it road safety was very much a bit in a silo. But now there's, I think you talked about it, Rod, looking at the road through the eyes of a citizen. And that encompasses road danger, it encompasses the involvement of young people, as you were talking about, Chris, but it also involves the other issues of air pollution, noise, and so on. Maybe just be worth a short discussion about, what people think about that and how it can be taken forward. Yeah, Rod, on you go. Yeah.
Look, I think we all recognise that there are huge interconnections between so many different factors in life when you look at transport and transit. You'd say noise, danger, accessibility, inequality between different road users, etc. And many of us come at it from one particular perspective, whether that's 20 mile an hour, or whether that's e-scooters, or whether it's road danger reduction. But what is important is that we keep on discussing this, because the more we discuss it, we recognize that if you can reduce the number of motor vehicles, then you will reduce the influence of many of those things. You'll make the streets much more pleasant. And when it comes to reducing motorized vehicle trips, the low-hanging fruit is really the less than a mile, right? That pop to the shops, that journey to the school, right? Those many things where at the moment we have a culture of saying, oh, just get in the car and pop round here or there. We can actually, by making those streets safer and feeling better, then we can not only make them better, but also encourage and accelerate, right, that move away from the motor vehicle and into much more practical, convenient, and pleasant modes of transport. And there will be big benefits for public health as well. And it's a case of involving all of these professionals, the public health ones, the educationalists, the people looking at equality of transport, and getting them all to see that they're all joined together. And I think that's the key to change. It's certainly what we've seen in local authorities, because 20 mile an hour is not being implemented because it ticks one box, but because of the number of boxes which it ticks. And I think the more we can be inclusive in our discussions, then I think there is an opportunity for huge progress in actually reducing traffic, reducing road danger, and making all of our places better places to be, however we're getting around those places.
I would recommend listeners going to the UN Global Road Safety Week website and having a look there, because they're acknowledging this safety is broad and they've got lots of interesting case studies there. I'll put it in the chat.
Thanks, Margaret, and before that, Rod, as well. Amy, you look as if you're bursting to come in.
Oh, no. I mean, yeah, I was trying to make this point. I mean, it just seems, when we think of it as a triangle, and at the very tip, it's the pointy, it's the most obvious, that's the KSIs, that's the most immediate devastation. But then you go into the much broader harm associated with air pollution or physical inactivity, let alone getting down to the climate emergency. We all say we're evidence-based, but then too many people on road safety, I think, still have blinkers on and are only focused on trying to promote safer driving, whereas the bigger issue is around driving less. So yeah, I fully support the joined up approach. That's road danger reduction.
And just to add a little bit more, particularly for Chris, we're talking about just now, road safety, the environmental impacts, but there's also a wider equality or sometimes inequality issue here, which can be overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think I sort of touched on it earlier. Just ensuring, it's evolving so quick, and as it evolves, we just want to ensure that people from all walks, all backgrounds are included in the development and access to the systems and technology that we have access to on all levels of micromobility. So we just, I'd say encouragement. We've all got to keep our eye on that. I think one of the key KPIs for the e-scooter trials is including disadvantaged communities or marginalized communities as well. So that's quite encouraging to see, and I'd be keen to see the reports and outcomes on that as well. But yeah, we're definitely, we've developed a council for our young people so they can have a say, and we can give them a voice in terms of what they would want from it. One of the things that's been made very clear is that our young people definitely want access to these scooters. At the moment, that is, as we've heard, it's illegal for them, and they're being punished for it inconsistently. So yeah.
No, thanks for that. Rod.
Yeah, I think one of the things is when we think of road safety, in the past, what has happened is it's been very much location specific. We'd say there was a site-specific problem at this junction or at this crossing. Let's do something about that. and it's always been sort of concrete and lights and roundabouts and everything. But there is a move now to actually look at population-wide interventions. How can we make something which has a broad benefit? Actually, it's like, instead of looking at the tip of the iceberg, we look at what's underneath the water, right? And we can get huge benefits from that. And I say it's like the difference between public health professional and a surgeon. Surgeon can fix something which has gone wrong, but only one at a time. Whereas a public health person can actually make the whole population 1% fitter. And if we can do that, then that is far more effective. Now, I'm not saying replace surgeons with public health people or vice versa, but we need both. And that's why the more inclusive we can be about these discussions about road danger, then the better we will make it.
No, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. There's a very specific question. You may not know the answer because you may not be terribly familiar, as I'm not, about the exactly what's going on. But in Greater Manchester, there's a program of putting zebra crossings on side roads, presumably as a way of traffic calming the side roads and reducing the danger. Does anybody want to? There's a question really about, does anybody want to comment on that? Rod?
Yes, it's not pedestrian crossings as we're familiar with, because it's putting in a very low-cost pedestrian crossing, which is on the entrance to a side road. No militia beacons, just black and white strips across the road. And you'll probably be familiar, if you go to France, you'll find pedestrian crossings all over the place. They are just that. And the idea is, again, they're changing the way we look and feel about that, to see that pedestrians have rights right the way down the road. It is being trialled, and I know that the Welsh government is considering looking at the outcome of those trials as well. So I know elsewhere, right, they're looking to see how effective those can be. But they could transform the way in which we can put in facilities for pedestrians, because they're so cheap, because you don't need the electrics laying to the pedestrian crossing, which is a huge cost.
Amy?
No, I just wanted to thank Manchester for taking the lead on investing in that. I mean, in London, they've invested in the direct vision with lorries, they've invested in bus safety systems, but Manchester, no, they pushed the DFT and the government on that, and thank you.
There's a question, which is, well, there's two questions. One's a little bit negative and the other one's a bit more positive. We'll take them together. I think they may be particularly aimed at the 20 mile per hour. Are there disbenefits, Rod, from 20 miles per hour, and how would they be assessed? And on a more positive question, are there benefits in traffic flow and particularly for buses?
Well, the disbenefits are hard to find. Many people are seeking them, right? But really, there are very little in the way of disbenefits. The only one which you could come up with is an increase in travel times. But one of the things which we know is that at peak times, then actually having a 20-mile limit does not increase travel times, because travel times are mainly dictated by how long you've stopped rather than how fast you're going when you're not stopped, right? And I think cyclists will know this, the syndrome of overtaking the Porsche for the fourth time, because actually in most urban spaces, traffic speeds are fairly low. So there's not really evidence of any real appreciable disbenefits.
Thanks for that.
Then
yeah,
part of that, John.
No, I was going to say if there's no disbenefit, the other question was, are there positive benefits in traffic in traffic flows.
Right.
Presumably the idea is that traffic may be moving more, they don't say this, but I'm more smoothly. Are there positive benefits for
Well,
that?
there are benefits because it's easier to pull out, right? Again, in terms of cognitive skills, in terms of seeing approaching traffic, it's much easier if the speeds are lower, right, to judge those speeds. For buses, there's a big advantage. First of all, there's the first and last mile for the customers of buses. But also, if you reduce the speed of the traffic passing by buses when they're stopped, then it becomes much easier for a bus to pull out. It becomes much easier for a car driver to allow a bus to pull out from being stopped. So it will as well reduce the differential journey time between buses and cars as well. So there are advantages around there. Plus, it's much more comfortable on a bus going around corners at 20 miles an hour than 30 miles an hour.
Yes, except when you're in a rush to get back home late at night. But yeah, but on the whole, that's absolutely right, Rod. Listen, I think we've got one more question. It's quite a wide question, and it's about road danger reduction. And the question really is looking to Europe and European countries. Are there examples of where countries which are adopting the road danger reduction approach, perhaps more than others? If we don't know the answer, that's absolutely fine. But it's an interesting point.
I think Norway is an interesting place to start. Sweden is where Safe System started and Vision Zero, and Norway is somewhere where they've worked in that. I understand that in Oslo they had a year recently with no fatalities, people walking and cycling, and they've worked really hard within the city centre to reduce the motor vehicle use. But I can't off the top of my head think of research papers, but we're part of ETSC, that's the European Transport Safety Council, and would have examples there if someone wants to follow it up later.
Right.
The two examples that come to mind are, Margaret mentioned Oslo and Helsinki, and that's both where they reduce parking spaces and speed limits. So
I think we're all on a journey, all the different countries, and the more some of us are in different places on that journey than others, and the more we look around and see what others are doing, then the better we can move with those who are perhaps moving faster. But yeah, Spain has already set a national 30km/h speed limit. The Netherlands is planning to do the same. All over Europe, we're all, as individual countries, making progress. There's much to be achieved when you look at some of the individual success stories in Paris, in Sweden, such as Helsinki, and so on. So there's a lot happening out there.
Yeah, and just to add, there's a lot happening that wasn't happening 20 years ago. Yeah. I think it's a trajectory that we're on. It's different now than where we were 20 years ago, both in terms of speed and road danger reduction, and also in terms of adopting and the new technology like e-scooters, which are coming on board, and seeing how they can play a positive role in the transport mix.
Yeah.
And also look at how they're subsidizing public transport fares. There are some lessons there for us too.
There most certainly are. I mean, I think the UK has got some of the highest in the world, Amy. So once you can escape out of the UK on your public transport, then it's simple, easy going. But it's escaping from the UK, which is costly.
I think we can be often far too insular when it comes to road safety and road danger reduction, right? And again, what I see elsewhere is that the countries which are moving fastest have grasped that nettle, about being in this third decade of the 21st century, where we do have aspirations for micromobility, public health, and so many things, which actually 30, 40 years ago, we never thought about, right?
Yeah.
So yes, it's there's a lot of good stuff out there. And again, some of those countries are looking at what's happening in the UK and Wales as well, and saying, yes, we can have some of that.
Indeed. Well, listen, that's a hugely positive note, Rod, in which to finish. So I want to thank all of you as contributors and speakers. I want to thank Brogan again, who's made all this happen. And also want to thank all the people who have been on the call. I think there's been a lot. I think there's been over between 50 and 100 people on the call. It's been recorded, as I said at the beginning, so it'll be up on YouTube, and I think we hopefully can make the papers available for those who want them. So thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.